world's greatest goals require the world's largest leaders. Welcome everyone to Real Leaders for the Global Goals. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Along with me today, we have Stephen Hecht, the Chief Executive Peacemaker at Million Peacemakers, as well as the Vice Chair of the YPO's Peace Action Network at YPO. Stephen, thanks for being with us today.
Great to be with you, Kevin.
Well, peace be with you first.
Oh, thank you.
Stephen, some experiences that have led up to Million Peacemakers and the Peace Action Network. Give us a background and tell our audience how you got involved in this.
Okay. So as a YPO member since '89, I come from a family business background that had a lot of conflict. I was third generation, and conflict was just a normal part of our everyday dining room table talk, but it wasn't very constructive. It was quite destructive. And I didn't have the tools to deal with conflict very constructively. And in finding, or in talking to other members of YPO who are young chief executives, by the way, I'm old now, I'm a YPO Gold member, over 50, they had a lot, there was a lot of commonality. They were uncomfortable dealing with conflict constructively. I also was interested in geopolitical conflict, and I've also had a fair amount of personal conflict. I've been married 28 years, but with 3 wives. So I'm happily married now the 3rd time, but till I got to this point, there's been a fair amount of conflict. Back in 2012, I was the chair of education for our Canadian region. I wanted an event that I could learn from myself, and conflict having been a big part of my life, I thought that would be a great thing to focus on because our members, again, experience a lot of that. And I got buy-in from all of our 17 chapters across Canada to do that event. I bought a dozen books on conflict resolution, figuring I would hire an expert. But I found they were very tough to get through, typically by PhDs for PhDs. No offense to PhDs there. My co-author is one. But I realized because we need change-inducing take-home value through experiential learning, I'd have to create the event myself, which led to an event which is now called nonflict, or nonflict workshop. Nonflict, a word we coined. And that event won the Best Leadership Development Award for YPO in 2012 when we did it, which led, in the end, for me, finding more personal satisfaction of spreading the nonflict way than building real estate shopping centers. So I left real estate and started, or co-founded Million Peacemakers 5 years ago.
Amazing. So when I think of peace, you gave me your background, I'm going to give you my background. I'm from Portland, Oregon. That's all you need to know. And when we think of peace, we think of hippies. But when I look at you, you don't look like a hippie. Can you explain to our audience what you define peace as and how it's being incorporated in the non-flict way?
So peace can be defined as the absence of conflict. But when you look at what the definition of conflict is, it's just 2 or more different perspectives coming into contact with each other. By definition, conflict is neither positive or negative. How we deal with it is either constructive or destructive. Most of us don't have the tools to deal with it constructively, so it's often destructive. So peace starts within yourself. A lot of us have inner conflict, which then gets translated into external conflict.
How is peace being incorporated into businesses and managers and leaders?
It's a great question. So we have a process that teaches us to understand called the nonflict way. Very simple, it fits on the back of my business card. It's a 3-step process where we take the time to understand ourselves and the other. When we do, we often find commonality. At a business point of view, our common reality is we both might care about the future of the company that's employing us, so we could keep jobs and maybe grow with the company, right? That's our common reality. So then we look at what are the obstacles, then we look at what's our ideal reality, what are the obstacles to achieve it, then what can we do to overcome those obstacles that we can control or influence. Often, when we poll CEOs, about 1/3 of them avoid conflict. And culture starts at the top. Therefore, your employees are probably walking on eggshells as well, avoiding conflict, which isn't a way of dealing with it because ultimately then you explode. About 1/3 use force or power, do it my way or else. And again, that goes throughout the organization. That doesn't really harbor a great atmosphere of people that really want to perform for you. You know, if you're being told what to do in an aggressive way. About a third use compromise, just cut it in half, 50-50, which is not really win-win, it's not lose-lose, it's neither. You just get half of what you want. So nonflict is another way of dealing with conflict, and we've now created nonflict certification for companies where it becomes the culture within the organization to deal with conflict constructively.
Interesting. And we think about culture, I feel like this can also translate into this culture and these employees' home lives. How is this this nonflict, this idea, this peace, this mindset translated for employees' home lives as well as their work lives?
It's the exact same model for an inner conflict, a conflict at home with your spouse or partner, or even with your kids. It's a simple process, and that's the beauty of it. And that was my goal, that any model we came up with had to be so simple. Number one, it fits on the back of a card, or you could take a picture of it, and it's for any conflict. Even geopolitical conflict down to a conflict you're having within yourself or with your husband, wife, or kids.
So the geopolitical conflicts, have you approached any people in positions of power that may already be in the conflict of war or anything like that?
So our strategic positioning for Million Peacemakers is, for those who desire peace, Million Peacemakers enables global transformation by reframing conflict into nonflict. So we're starting for those who desire peace. So if we find a politician who really wants peace, we'll work with them. Often politicians are focused on dividing and conquering. Vote for me to protect you against the other. They don't want peace. They want to create conflict. We're not bothering with those people.
Will we ever live in a world where there's no conflict?
There's always conflict.
Will we ever live in a world where there's only peace?
The conflict is positive. We need conflict or two or more different perspectives for innovation and growth.
Right.
Now, how we deal with our goal is to train everyone to deal with conflict constructively. So we've trained about 225,000 people in the 5 years since we started. And right now, for example, we're working with Amazon to create an Alexa skill. And there are over 100 million users out there already, and as of last January, there were more, where that everyone could use that skill to walk them through a conflict at home or at work. And then we're going to be talking to Google, Microsoft, we're already in talks with, so to really spread it to hundreds of millions of people to have these tools easily accessible.
Talk about impact that's been making on a lot of different people. Now you mentioned Alexa, the Google Voice, and all these disruptive technological innovations coming. What's the vision for Million Peacemakers, and where do you see this going, and how many people do you think it'll be able to impact?
So we called ourselves Million Peacemakers, but the same day I registered million, I registered billion.
There you go.
We're not going to stop, we'll have a party and change our name. I was at the Vatican in March, talking to the Pope brought in religious leaders feeling that because 82% of the population of the world identifies as being part of a religion, because politicians aren't taking action toward the SDGs, how could religious leaders maybe take action? They asked me to talk about how nonflict could be a tool for affecting change on any of the SDGs. Then they invited me back to be part of the Catholic working group creating policy for the Pope on peace and nonviolence. I'm Jewish, so that was kind of interesting. So we're looking at various venues where we could leverage, be it companies and organizations, institutions, Vatican, other religions. We don't care, because everyone, at the end of the day, wants the same thing.
Right.
Whatever religion you are or not, we all want to feel respected and understood. Feeling disrespected is the source of 90% or more of the conflicts. We all want to feel safe. We all want to have love. We all want to have hope for the future, for ourselves, our children and grandchildren, and yes, and our companies.
I like that a lot, Stephen. And you're actually the second person today that said that we all want the same thing. And I think that's an interesting point that I've never heard about. But I feel like a lot of leaders are able to articulate what they want, what the people want. So the last question I have for you, Stephen, is what is your definition of a real leader?
Great question. So to me, a real leader is someone who has that passion and who's able to bring on people just by being authentic, not trying to trick people. Just be yourself. Be whoever you are, if you're an introvert, extrovert, whatever, but have a goal that people could get behind, that would be inspiring for them and to change their lives. So to me, a real leader helps people make their lives better.
And last but not least, Stephen, where can people find more information about Million Peacemakers, and how can they get involved?
So it's millionpeacemakers.org. If you went to .com, that would work too. And have a book called Nonflict, The Art of Everyday Peacemaking, which I co-authored with Dr. Amir Kafir. Be found on Amazon.com or .ca or wherever you are in the world. It's in English, Spanish. The Pope got our book in Spanish. Marathi in India. It'll be in French soon. So those are a few ways. And you could find my email hecht@millionpeacemakers.org. I'd love to talk to you.
All right, for Stephen Hecht, I'm Kevin Edwards telling you all to go out there, be authentic, and always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
It's fun.